A student recently asked me, can you sue your state? To answer this question, you have to go back even further, to the days of yore when on the throne sat the king, and the king served because God wanted him to. So whenever people came along and said, you owe us, the king could simply say, no, I don't. The only other option the people had would be to call a judge, except that the judges were hired by the king, who was hired by God. So the judges could tell the king, pay up, but the king would probably just say, I hired you and I can fire you. And this hiring and firing was known as sovereign immunity. In the same way the king has sovereign immunity, the state governments can claim their own version of sovereign immunity. The debate began with a man by the name of Chisolm who took on the state of Georgia. According to Chisolm, who was a lawyer trying to settle the estate of a Mr. Fakar, the state of Georgia owed Mr. Fakar money because Mr. Fakar gave them weapons during the Revolutionary War. Interestingly, the Supreme Court, which was only made up of 5 people at the time, said that Georgia did in fact owe money and set the precedent that yes, you can sue your state. But wait, there's more. Congress was not happy with the decision, so they passed the 11th Amendment to the Constitution. The 11th Amendment says judicial, this means judge. A judge's power shall not extend means to reach, against any one of the United States. In other words, the Congress made a law saying the courts can no longer hear cases where citizens sue the government. So it would seem that that's the end of the story and you can't sue the government, but wait, there's even more. Let's say a person is a state official. This means that they work for the state, and that person does something unconstitutional. This happened in the year 1908. In this case, a man by the name of Young was in charge of enforcing a new law in which Minnesota limited the amount railroads could charge their customers. This case came to be known as Exparte Young. The stockholders of the Northern Pacific Railway decided to sue the railroad and also to sue Young because he was in charge of enforcing the law. Young's argument was that he could not be sued because he was an official of the state. And as we have already learned from the Supreme Court, you can't sue a state. But again, however, the Supreme Court did argue that because what Young was doing was unconstitutional, he would be stripped of his rights as a state official. This set the precedent for future cases that if a person does something unconstitutional in the name of the state, they lose their sovereign immunity of that state. So to the question, can you sue the government, you actually have to ask another question first. Did an official of the government do something unconstitutional? If yes, you can sue, but if not, then you can't because sovereign immunity. So now it seems straightforward. However, in the case of Ex parte Young, they were trying to get rid of a law. But what if there is money involved instead? Can you sue a state for money? And the answer is a resounding no. In the case of Edelman v. Jordan, the court agreed that you cannot sue states for money because then the state itself would be responsible for wrongdoing, which by the nature of, you guessed it, sovereign immunity, this cannot exist. There are many other cases on this issue, but I think this covers the main points of whether or not you're allowed to sue the state. Basically, you can't, unless you can prove that a state official did something against the Constitution, but even then, you can't get any money anyway.